All right, here we go on a Sunday morning in Las Vegas. Just after 8 o'clock, I'm Brian Feldman, and this is Outta. We are here live, same time every Sunday on Fox Sports Radio, 98.9 FM and 1340 AM, flagship of the Vegas Golden Knights. We're coming to you live from Spencer's studio in Las Vegas, located basically at the 95 and Jones Boulevard, and we will be here until they let us back into the Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studios. That is due to COVID protocols still. I don't know if we'll ever get back in there, Spencer, but hopefully one day. Joining me on the show is social media director Spencer the Wiz Ostrovsky.
Nobody beats the Wiz. Nobody beats the Wiz.
That is right. The Wiz has his own theme music. Also part of the show and social distancing back in the Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio. Is our longtime show producer, back with us now, hopefully to stay, Chris Magnum Chapman. Mags is also the locker room reporter for the Vegas Golden Knights radio network, and Mags produces a number of other shows at Lotus Broadcasting as well. He is known all over the radio industry here in Las Vegas. The show is also streaming on the LV Sports Network, and you can watch the show on Facebook Live. The page is called Outta. That's OUTTA. LINE. You can also follow the show on Instagram and Twitter, the handle at Outta Fox LV. And since we are live, your calls and questions are welcome. The Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio line is 702-876-1340.
Hi, this is Bubby, and it's time for What's on Tap.
What's on Tap, brought to you by title sponsor Residential Bancorp. Whether purchasing a new home or refinancing the home you already own, Residential Bancorp is the company you can turn to for all of your home financing needs. Residential Bancorp, funding America one neighborhood at a time, now offering $2,500 free to everyone and anyone who qualifies for a home purchase loan in the state of Nevada. On Tap, the Vegas Golden Knights are massive favorites to win their division in 2021. We'll talk about it. The Raiders are 2-0 and play their final preseason game today. And to this point, we have only seen one quarterback. I want to know how many Jeopardy contestants in history would be able to answer the question, who is Nathan Peterman? I'm just saying. A former NFL quarterback and probable future Hall of Famer is coaching high school football, not even 1 year removed from the NFL. Who is he? Stick and Stay, the host of Straight Outta Vegas on Fox Sports National Radio, Sirius Satellite Radio, iTunes, will be joining us to talk about his new book. And that, of course, is Bernie Fratto. And Giggy Maxwell, Media Relations Director of the Las Vegas Aces, will also be joining to tip off our newest segment. Find out what that is on today's show as well. Plus, the Las Vegas Aviators are the hottest team, Spencer, in AAA baseball. Who would have thought that they might still be able to make a run at the postseason this year? Hey, that's what's on tap. If you are looking to buy a home or to refinance the home you currently own, choose a company you can trust, Residential Bancorp, funding America one neighborhood at a time. And again, right now, Residential Bancorp is offering Nevada home buyers $2,500 towards closing costs for anyone and everyone who qualifies for any home financing purchase program in the state of Nevada. Call 702-964-5720, Residential Bancorp, for details. And Spencer, before we get into Vegas Golden Knights and Nightcap, man, how are you? I appreciate you filling in last minute for me, you and Chris Wynn. Chris out there, if you're listening, greatly appreciate you, my friend. Always happy to have people be able to fill in for you when you need a time off at the very last minute. Good show last week.
It was a blessing. Yeah, I always appreciate the opportunity, so I appreciate that, and I thought the show went really well.
Yeah, it always goes well, man. You guys take over, and in here I'm back. You can see on Facebook once again why I was born with a face for the radio, and here we go, man. So, Mags, you back there in studio with us?
Yeah, I'm here, man.
All right, that man, love having Mags back. Just the voice alone. We're not all three powwowing together like in the olden days, but maybe one day we'll get back there. And I'm glad Max is back in studio because I want to ask him a question about when we get to our first segment, which is right now.
Hockey players, as you know, are warriors. They don't give up. They come to play every game.
It's time for Nightcap, a cupful of the Vegas Golden Knights. From highlights to interviews to special events, the puck starts here.
Real quick, before I jump right into this segment, I got to say I've been asked this by a number of people, so I want to just clear this up right here and now once and for all. Why do I start every show with the Vegas Golden Knights and Nightcap, even when we are completely out of hockey season? Let me answer that question real simply. Number one, they're the first major league professional franchise in the city of Las Vegas, let alone the state of Nevada. And number two, and more importantly, they have damn well earned it, man. Look at what they have done in their brief 4-year history. 3 conference finals. They should have gone to at least the second round in year 2 when they got screwed by the officials in game 7 of the first round playoff series against the San Jose Sharks. And you know what? Until otherwise noted, they will always face off my show and face off this show because, again, they've earned it. Chris, listen, it's difficult to compare last year's performances to this year's because of the divisional alignment and unbalanced schedules. But of the teams in the Pacific Division this season, only one of them, the Edmonton Oilers, finished the 2021-22 season within 10 points of the Vegas Golden Knights point total. The next closest team, Calgary, was 27 points back. The Golden Knights not only have the best roster in the division, one that has been in the conference finals and semifinals in 3 of its first 4 years, as I just mentioned, and of course that includes this past season. But the rest of the division is just all stuck in various levels of mediocrity rebuilding. Anaheim is stuck in neutral. Los Angeles has a bright future, but is probably not ready for that jump. Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton are total wild cards, and Seattle's an expansion team. It would be a shock, Chris Chapman, and major upset if Vegas does not win the division and win it easily this year, right?
Yeah, they absolutely should win it. They should win it going away. They are, at least on paper, the best team in the division. I will say this, that obviously some changes. I think the loss of Alex Tuck until February at least is going to play a role. I think it'll make things a little interesting early on, but obviously getting him back is basically like acquiring a player at the trade deadline because it's going to put a jolt of energy in that team. I think Laurent Brossoit is a really good signing. I think he's going to be a really solid backup. I mean, it's hard to look at what he did previously because he was never really on a good team. He's going to be playing with the best team he's ever had. So when Robin Lehner needs a spell, I think Laurent Brossoit will fill in well. Here's the thing. A lot of people were unhappy about the trade for Fleury. Look at this from a hockey standpoint. Robin Lehner is a very, very good goaltender. He is a number 1 goaltender. The numbers don't lie. It doesn't matter if he was playing in Buffalo, if he was in Chicago. Here, he is an elite, very good goaltender. Maybe not top 3 or 4 in the league, but he's definitely a guy who can carry this team. So I don't think that losing Fleury is going to be that much of a detriment to this team going forward. What worries me is some of the depth that they have on the third line. And of course, that's always been the issue here. It doesn't matter if it was year 1 or year 2 or today. The third line is always going to be a question mark until they prove that they are a legit third line. Not to say they can't be. I think this could be, and I say it every single year, and every single year I've been wrong. But I think this is the year they finally have the third line figured out. I think Dadonov is going to add a tremendous amount to that third line. But going back to the original point, there is zero. You never want to say never, because obviously in sports, anything can happen. But this is a team on paper that should win this Pacific Division going away. I think the Vancouver Canucks will be their stiffest competition. Obviously, Edmonton's always a wild card because you know what you're getting with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. You don't know what you're getting with anyone else on that team. Calgary, I think, is a mess. It seems they've been a mess for a couple of years. I think LA, young, hungry, I think they're going to go out and they're going to play really well this year. I think Los Angeles will be a contender for a playoff spot in the Pacific Division. And as you mentioned, Anaheim, they're stuck in neutral. A lot of young players, but they're a long, long way from competing in this division, especially when you have a team the caliber of the Golden Knights in that division with you. You lose the Arizona Coyotes, which is a shame because the Golden Knights have basically feasted on them since they came into the league. And you get the Seattle Kraken, who I think people are going to be fairly high on. I'm not so high on them. I think their goalies are going to be really good. Obviously, with Grubauer and Drieger, I don't really know what else to expect from the Kraken. I think they had a better free agency period than they did a draft. But, Ron Francis and company, they obviously have a plan. They knew. I'm not going to say they don't know what they're doing because I believe they do know what they're doing. I don't think their goal was to come in and compete year one. I think their goal was to build for the future, and it seems that that's what they're doing. But I don't think they're going to be a threat. I know some people are like, oh, they'll be a playoff team. I don't know. Let's pump the brakes on that. At the end of the day, it comes down to the Vegas Golden Knights. If they play to what we believe they are capable of, they'll win this division. As you mentioned, they finished 10 points ahead of Edmonton last year. I think that's not unrealistic to think that they would finish 10 points ahead of the second-place team, especially when you get to play the San Jose Sharks 4 times a year, who Pete DeBoer has not lost to since he's been the coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. They have absolutely owned the San Jose Sharks, who, of course, have their own turmoil, of course, with the Evander Kane stuff and some very high overpaid players on their roster.
No, Chris, great points all the way around, and you touched on about everything I was going to say. I was going to say they need to shore up the third line. The question is the centerman position on that line. I think they're looking to Nolan Patrick to be that centerman. But hey, you know what? Peyton Krebs is an errant slap shot to the jaw away from being on the roster to start this season, and still very well could be. I think that's a guy that we're going to see on the full-time roster series. He's only 20 years old. That injury, if not for the injury last year, you probably see Krebs in the postseason. So that was pretty surprising. And you talked about the depth at goaltender. Yeah, they lose Marc-Andre Fleury, but as you mentioned, Robin Lehner and Laurent Brossoit, tremendous tandem right there. I think getting him was a great. And don't sleep on Logan Thompson down there in Henderson, because this guy last year was maybe the best goaltender in the AHL with a .919 save percentage and 2.33 goals against average. The guy is really good, and
there's no maybe about that. He is the best. He was the best goalie in the AHL last year, and I think he's probably going to be a year or two away from maybe being in the NHL. The goal right now is to get Logan Thompson playing time, and the best place for him to do that is in the AHL, not on the bench in the NHL. But man, what a story Logan Thompson was. I mean, he's a kid who played college hockey. Not a lot of NHL goalies play college hockey, but Logan Thompson, of course, he did get some action last year in one game, and he was on the roster a little bit. But man, what a tremendous story he is. And Dylan Ferguson's probably going to be his backup in Henderson this year. He won the he won the Kelly Cup in the ECHL.
He did, and it's pretty cool when you talk about Logan Thompson again, because of the situation is the Golden Knights have never made it through a season in their first 4 seasons with only 2 goaltenders. So very good chance you will see Logan Thompson getting some time with the Vegas Golden Knights at some point during the season. Some other good prospects, again, and we'll talk about them in the future. Lucas Cormier, Brandon Brisson, and Ivan Morozov, that kid from Russia, looks like he'll be a good player down the road too. A lot of good prospects. And the funny thing is, the Golden Knights in their first 4 years, you would think you'd be talking about a lot of young players. They really haven't had to lean on any of their draft picks or any of the young players, because they have so many grizzled seasoned veterans that they've either started this team with or traded for, and a couple of great prospects, as you mentioned, Alex Tuck, that wasn't drafted by the Golden Knights originally, but got his NHL debut and start with the Golden Knights, as did Shea Theodore. And those are 2 tremendous prospects down the road. This team looks like they're doing nothing but staying at the upper echelon of the National Hockey League, at least for the next couple of seasons. So should be an exciting year. Listen, let's move right forward and get going, because I want to make sure we get Bernie on in time and keep the flow going here. So the next segment, real quick, I wanted to talk about is the Raiders. They finish up their preseason today at 1:00 in San Francisco. They've won their first 2 preseason games, Spencer. The opener in Seattle, 20-17, where Nathan Peterman, by the way, as we mentioned, nobody would get that on Jeopardy. Nobody would get it. But he played the entire game in both games. He went 29 for 39, 246, and no touchdowns in game 1. He did have 1 interception. And then against the Rams last week, 16-24, 172 yards, 1 TD, 2 interceptions. But he rushed for a team high 35 yards. And John Gruden really likes this kid. He's not going to upseat either of the two guys in front of him in Derek Carr or Marcus Mariota. But Nathan Peterman, I will say, before his first start of the first preseason game this year for the Raiders, I laughed whenever I heard his name because I remember that game of San Diego against Buffalo where, I mean, I don't know that he could have gotten the starting role at Bishop Gorman. Not that that's a bad role, but he's in the NFL, and that's a high school football team. But Nathan Peterman, to me, looks like an NFL quarterback. Granted, a third-team NFL quarterback, but I think he's definitely earned his spot on the roster of the Las Vegas Raiders.
All I can hope is that when I find my next relationship, that I can find someone who supports me as much as John Gruden supports Nathan Peterman. I mean, what if that guy would go to the grave for him? So you got to appreciate that. But, just quickly on the Raiders, my general impression on the team is that they've gotten worse almost everywhere. They've gotten worse at offensive line. They've gotten worse at receiver. And I guess the slight upgrade is at defensive line. So they've had a good preseason. Winning every game is fine. But overall, I feel like it's just not a good sign for the team. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, Spencer, quarterback is definitely the biggest question mark on this team. People say the offensive line. I'm saying question mark as far as the future of the Raiders, because the bottom line is if Derek Carr does not produce this year and the team doesn't win, number one, I think at the end of the season, you will see John Gruden on a hot seat. $10 million a year is a lot of money to play a coach, and Derek Carr is paid very well. I like him. He's great for the community. He is definitely a good person. But as far as a quarterback goes, he reminds me of the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. He's stuck in mediocrity. I don't see growth in him. You've been off his bandwagon since day one. I don't dislike him, and I think he's definitely an NFL quarterback, but I think this is the season you need to see a dramatic improvement from Derek Carr. And the offensive line, even though they use their top pick on an offensive lineman, I don't know if it's good enough to protect him this year to make him the player that they need him to be to go forward.
Well, this is the way I think about it. I am not Derek Carr's friend. I've criticized him.
Yes,
heavily.
you want Marcus Mariota to start.
I would. I don't think it's a bad thing. Certainly, I think if you got rid of Derek Carr's contract and you alleviate some of that financial pressure, they could use it defensively. Not that I trust Mayock with a single dollar of the team, but any normal GM I think would do well with that kind of money. But here's the thing. I mean, our top wide receiver had 400 yards receiving last year. What is Derek Carr supposed to improve with? I mean, if he doesn't have,
he's got arguably one of the top 3 tight ends in football.
I mean, at some point, this guy Darren Waller blocks on third downs most of the time.
He does. He's gonna, and you have no faith in Harry Ruggs. You never have.
He was the worst wide receiver taken in the first round last year, and they had their pick of the litter.
He still flies, and he does make some big catches. He just needs to be consistent.
He has to be the wide receiver one. We're talking a huge step forward. I
agree.
I think that might be unfair of us to say that he needs to do that. The team just isn't in a good position right now. I think everybody's kind of fooling themselves, but who knows?
Well, one of the positions they're really hurting in, and we'll leave it at this, is the linebacker position. They've been getting very depleted. And one linebacker I know we kind of favor here. I mean, we're homers. We live in Las Vegas. And it was really cool story to see Javen White initially make the practice squad last year. And then, of course, he graduated to the team. I think he played 3 games with the Raiders last season. And he really looked to be on the 53-man roster this year. I think he was going to make the team. He played really well against Seattle, led the team in tackles, got a stinger late in the game, was playing well against the Rams last week, and then got carted off the field with a knee injury, Spencer. I still think Gruden wants him around. And what I noticed about Javen White, he's always had skinny legs and stuff, but he has definitely bulked up in 1 year. They have made this guy into a formidable size linebacker because at 6'2", 6'3", which he is, that has nice height to play on the inside at the linebacker position. I think he's a sandbacker for him. But, then to bulk up on top of it, he really looked to make the jump, and it looked like he was on his way to eventually being a starting NFL linebacker. Who would have thought that a couple of years ago, playing for one of the worst defenses in the country here in Las Vegas? But Javen White was a football player. Cable and I talked about it a bunch on the show. We weren't shocked that he made the practice squad last year. It was also a little bit of a homer move, good move by Gruden, some good local PR. But Javen White earned this position, and I'm sad for him right now. The linebackers of the Raiders, Spencer, how big and important is it going to be that they get healthy or figure out what they're going to do with that position this season? I think they're going to be improved the defensive secondary. They picked up a seasoned veteran, 10 years in the league. That will help them, but I'm concerned about linebacking.
Yeah, well, health is one thing. Whether or not they're good enough is another thing. I mean, they spent a lot of money to get Corey Littleton there. Mayock loved so many guys from these Rams defenses that never translate very well. Kiwatowski, I think his name is. He was decent, but just okay. So if they're hurt and talented, that's been a bigger issue. I think this defense is going to struggle mightily at the beginning of the season.
I don't disagree with you. Real quickly, we got 1 minute to talk about the 5 top rookie quarterbacks that will come into the league in 2021. We know them all: Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones. Out of those 5 guys, Spencer, who's going to start this year and who is going to shine the brightest?
Well, the easy ones, obviously, the Jaguars actually just traded Gardner Minshew just to spell any sort of rumors or, any sort of quell any excitement.
Anybody that was thinking that was a competition is,
but clearly it was
to them, football is actually football. Okay, and it's not played with your hands, if you know what I'm talking
Trevor
about.
Lawrence and Zach Wilson, I think the Bears are just they didn't want to leave him Justin Fields out there to play against the Rams week 1. They're going to let Andy Dalton get absolutely crushed. So week 2, they can start their guy and he doesn't have to throw him to the Hounds and Aaron Donald and all that. Trey Lance, it feels like one of those situations where you had the Alex Smith and then you had Colin Kaepernick right behind him. It feels that way, although I know Trey Lance has had some big plays, but he's been kind of inconsistent. He kind of runs a little too much for my liking, but no doubt that he's had a few good performances, a few good drives, something to look forward to. Although if I was them, I'd start Jimmy Garoppolo for the season. You have this guy's entire career to mess with him, an entire season there. So
It's a huge jump from the level of football he was playing in college to the NFL. So I agree with you there. What about Mac Jones? Probably the biggest question mark because, him and Cam Newton really are in a battle in New England for that starting job. I would have thought for sure that Cam Newton would have been more favored to be the starter for New England this year than I would say Andy Dalton would have been in Chicago. But now I'm starting to wonder because Cam Newton's just passing is not that accurate. We all know what he can do with his legs, but he's getting older. And Mac Jones is just a technician. He is a guy that absorbs football, and I'll bet out of all 5 of those guys, his football IQ is right up there with the best of them.
No doubt. I mean, he got that hype to be the number 4 pick in this year's draft, and I think Kyle Shanahan was really thinking about it too, but he may have gotten overstepped by the GM at some point, and they're like, no, we need the guy who's a little more exciting. Mac Jones has been impressive, but Cam Newton's had a good preseason too. Recently, Cam Newton had to enter some COVID protocols because he didn't understand what it was and go into quarantine. The NFL is all about opportunity, as we know, and Mac Jones hasn't done things to make him deserve to be the second, position on that team. He will start at some point this season. I just think Cam Newton is just not built for the longevity of a long season anymore. He's just getting older and up there. And again, like you said, inaccurate. Mac Jones is that shiny new toy too.
Well, I'll tell you this. We're going to leave it at this. We said who would have the most success out of the 5 of them this year. I think the obvious choice would still be Trevor Lawrence because, there's no question he is the next guy in Jacksonville for however many years he stays healthy, plays well. But I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb. I really like what I've seen from Zach Wilson in New York. He's also the clear-cut guy there. And I think statistically at the end of the year, Mags is going to like hearing this because we all thought maybe that they gave up on Sam Darnold too quickly. And he looks like he's going to make a little mark in Carolina. But I think Zach Wilson statistically is going to have the best season out of the 5 of them this year.
And what about Justin Fields? I mean, that could be a playoff team this year that we're talking about.
Yeah, but he might not start till game 3.
At that point, I mean, Jacksonville's going to be terrible.
Don't talk to me about the Bears. I can't talk to them. Jacksonville will be bad. The
Justin
Jets will be
Fields
bad
because he wants
too.
Lions
The
to pick
Jets will
him.
be bad too, but I think Zach Wilson will give you some statistics. I really like the way this guy throws the football.
He's been a lot more.
I think Zach Wilson's going to be better than Trevor Lawrence only because of the situation. You look at Urban Meyer, I don't think he's going to be a good coach in the NFL. He just seems too collegey for the NFL. I don't see that working. Lawrence, obviously, he has to maybe adjust a little bit to the NFL as opposed to playing at Clemson, and he's not playing Wake Forest and Georgia Tech every week. I'm not saying that the competition Zach Wilson faced playing at BYU was any better than that, but the reality is I think Zach Wilson was built to be a passer, whereas Trevor Lawrence is a better athlete, and I just don't think that Urban Meyer is going to help Trevor Lawrence in the way that I feel like the Jets and that situation will be better for Zach Wilson.
Well, Mags, like I said, I do agree with you this year. I think Trevor Lawrence will be a star in the NFL eventually. He has all the tools, and I haven't seen a quarterback, and we've been talking about him since he was a freshman at Clemson and won a national championship. But I really like, as I said, Zach Wilson throws the ball well. He seems to have all the maneuvers. And listen, we've got 1 minute before we're bringing on Bernie Fratto, so I want to jump right to fact this and get this out of the way because this is kind of a good one.
Fact this. If you don't like the facts, take your ass back to bed. Fact this.
The process is the best. I mean, Thursday and Friday nights are fun, but it's the process is the best. It's the the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and figuring out practice and thunderstorms and that are coming up every stinking afternoon. You're figuring out if you're going in the gym, you're walking through, wading in mud out there. But it's the process that makes it awesome. And tonight was special. I mean, shoot, I'm looking over and Dad's standing on the track and Mom's in the stands. My boys are spotting the ball. My brother's here coaching. It's like, man, this is our nephews and daughters are running around. I mean, it's, nieces. It was that kind of night,
Fact. Former quarterback Phillip Rivers is 8th all-time with 134 regular season NFL wins and an 8-time Pro Bowler, and is now 1-0 as a high school football coach in his native Alabama, coaching for St. Michael Catholic, the Cardinals. This after 16 seasons with the Chargers and one with the Colts has made me absolutely baffled. It has me baffled, Spencer. I understand that his father was a high school football coach. He has a wife, 9 kids, that's 7 daughters and 2 sons. Stay home with your family. He has no kids on the team. Yes, his brother coaches with him, but do you have any idea how demanding it is to even be a high school football coach in today's day and age? I mean, he can't just do this half-assed. It's a full-time gig. And he's even mentioned that he hasn't given up on his NFL career yet. I'm not going to go into this because I want to bring Bernie Fratto on and talk to Bernie about this great book he just finished not too long ago. But I am astonished, Phillip Rivers, with the family man that he is, a great spokesman for the NFL, an ambassador, probably a Hall of Famer. What are you doing coaching high school football? I understand when your kid's on the team. Like Mike Maddox was coaching UNLV when his son was playing for him. He's not there anymore. I mean, what the hell is Phillip Rivers doing? It's a great, admirable thing. He doesn't need the money. Does he not like being with his family? Too many kids running around the house? I honestly have no clue what Phillip Rivers is thinking coaching high school football. You don't need to follow the legacy of your dad. You played in the NFL for 17 years. Enough is enough, Phillip. Spend some time with your family unless you get a call to go back to the National Football League. That's it. Let's move on. Joining us on the Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio line is Bernie Fratto. Bernie Fratto, of course, if you haven't heard his show on Saturday nights on Fox Sports Radio, nationally Sirius satellite radio, iHeartRadio, this guy's amazing. 11 o'clock every Saturday night, and he's gracious enough to join us today after being on the air last night. Bernie recently published a book, The View from the Cheat Seats. I have read the intro, the foreword, and of course the letter that Dick Schaap sent Bernie Fratto a few years back. And he has that in the book as well, which really does explain who Bernie Fratto is. Bernie, I really appreciate taking the time to join the show this morning. I know you got off the air late night, or I should say early this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here. And the book has been out actually since July 5th, and I'm shocked it's done a lot better than I ever hoped it could have.
Bernie, I'm not shocked at all. The intro starts. You can relate to it immediately. If you're over the age of about 35, instantaneously you remember where you were when the famous Bronco of Al Collins was driving down the road with O.J. Simpson in it. I myself will never forget, I was in downtown Pontiac because also the World Cup was in town at the Pontiac Silverdome, and I was capitalizing on an opportunity, a venture there, and we were all standing at a bar television in amazement. Bernie, of course, at Tiger Stadium, making his media debut, something I hadn't known about, and you've told me so many stories, I didn't know about that, and it even goes farther in the story, talking about the press box announcer and who he was. Tell a little bit about that story, because you started the book with it.
Yeah, let me back up just a second, because the reason I ended up putting this book, it's a compilation of stories going back forever. I've always been a sucker for a good story. I think most of us are. There's an old saying, give me a fact and I'll learn it. Tell me the truth and I'll believe it, but share a good story that lives in my heart the rest of my life. And as Tip O'Neill once said, if the stories have the added value of being true, that's even better. Now we enjoy the games. We agree the game results and the box scores are important, but it's always the backstory that gives sports depth and texture. You hear the results of the game, but you feel the stories. So June 17th, 1994 was the first day I ever had a credential. The Tigers were playing the Toronto Blue Jays, the old Tiger Stadium. And back then in the press box, that was the first year that they installed monitors so you could watch the game while the game's going on. That was the first year they ever did that. And Brian, because all the press boxes you've been in, you see the monitors up there and the game is going on. But they weren't showing the game that night. They were showing the Bronco chase. Now, there was no sound. We had no idea literally what was going on. And all of a sudden, a picture of an LAPD police chief appears on the screen, David Gascon, and you can't read his lips. You can't tell what he's saying. So I had to wait till I got home that night about 1 o'clock and rewatched it. It's now become an iconic video where David Gascon is telling America and Tom Brokaw that O.J. Simpson is a fugitive from justice. That formed the basis for the first story in the opening of the book, basically because fast forward the circle of life, 2018, I joined Fox Sports Radio. I'm on my 3-year anniversary, and who's one of our producers? David Gascon. He is the son of the David Gascon we saw on TV that night back in 1994 talking about the OJ chase. And it's the circle of life and stories like that that are never ending. And that's exactly what this book is about. Stories that entertain people, that provoke thought, that inform. In some cases, they arouse emotion. In most cases, they'll make you laugh. But they're all true, and they have to do with people in the sports world that you hear about, but they have normal lives every day too. And there are a lot of stories behind the scenes that take place that, as I say in the book, you've never heard of, but that you'll never forget.
No, Bernie, and I had the pleasure and honor of working with Bernie Fratto years ago here at Fox Sports, where we got to you did a show called Inside the Fratto House, and it was a podcast that you did, and they played it every Saturday morning, and I got to go in there with Bernie. And what I love more than anything about that time, Bernie, was how much I learned from you, not just the stories you told, but about bettering myself and stuff. And I greatly appreciate that. But I always look forward to going into there with Bernie. We do it on like a Thursday and it would air on Saturdays. And whether it was about the national anthem or we were having a discussion of whether Tiger Woods was going to catch Jack Nicklaus major accomplishments, it was always just great, but it was always a different story with Bernie each week. And they were always fantastic. The forward of your book, you attribute the book or you dedicate it to a friend of yours and a mentor of yours, Dick Schaap. And Dick Schaap, one of the greatest storytellers of all time, Bernie. And you do remind me of him in that respect that, Dick had a ton of stories that you just were very compelling. And you've got the same ones, Bernie, in this book. Like I said, I've read the intro, I've read the forward, and I'm getting ready to start reading the book. It starts with chapter 1 called The Only Real Dream Team, which is going to surprise you right off the get-go because I'll bet the people hear the Dream Team and they start thinking of the 90s. Bernie's talking about way before any of our time. But how much did Dick Schaap, what he did and your relationship with him motivate you to write this book?
Tremendously, because I graduated from college with a degree in communications, journalism, and public relations, but I didn't have the awareness or consciousness or maturity to know I really wanted to go into to the sports media business. I'm a failed minor league baseball player, and I was poor, so I wanted to make money, so I went into the corporate world. But I was a huge sports fan, and I was always talking sports with people and telling stories. And Brian, you remember back in the day, ESPN had that great show, The Sports Reporters, with Dick Schaap. And, you had the great panels with, Mitch Alb and Tony Kornheiser, and every Sunday morning, it was a half-an-hour show. They would talk about the latest sports topics. And at the end of the show, they would do a thing called Parting Shots, which they still have a derivative of today. My friend Jeremy Schaap, still friends with him to this day. They do a show on Saturday mornings called OTL, and they do some parting shots. And I said, I want to write those. I want to tell those stories. I think I could do that. I literally picked up the phone and called Dick Schaap. This is around 1990. And he said, why not start faxing them to me? And I started faxing them to him, and he used them. We became friends. One thing led to another. The thing I learned from Schaap was he never had a favorite team. his favorite sport was people. And he was always very open about that. And he always said he doesn't root for a team, he roots for the story, and his favorite sport is people. So I'm always looking for those stories, either whether it's in the, in the heat of action or away from the scenes. Remember, Brian, we did a lot of Rebel Extra shows too, the post-game show for UNLV basketball, and you were doing it with me. We're during those turbulent times where people wanted to fire Dave Rice. I remember saying, if you fire him in midseason, you're going to set the program back 5 years. Well, they fired him in January of 16. Here we are in 2021. It's one of those deals you hate when you're right. But the bottom line is, hanging around him and mentoring with him, and in over the better part of a little over a decade, because he died in December of 2001, I got to correspond on a lot of projects, ghostwrite a lot of projects, come up with creative ideas. I was a part of the ESPN 50 for 50 or top 50 athletes in 1999. I basically wrote the Gordie Howe piece. So Dick really opened the door for me. He'd come on my show, he'd have me on his show, and I learned from him the way to package a message in a way that resonates. For instance, and Dick knew a lot of people. I mean, his book, he was going to call it name dropping. It's called Flashing Before My Eyes. All he does is tell stories. Well, I'll give you a quick sample of the type of story that's in the book, Brian. So Don Shula, the winningest football coach of all time in the NFL, he's human too, right? So one day, him and his wife and his 5 kids, they're up vacationing in upstate New York. And they say, why don't we take in a matinee movie today? And the family says, sure. So they head into this movie theater in the middle of nowhere in the afternoon. And as they walk in and enter the theater, there's only 3 people inside the entire movie theater, and they're all sitting down front. And as soon as the Shula clan walks in the door, the 3 people turn around and stand up and start clapping. Shula's wife, Dorothy, looks at him and says, well, look at that, Don. See, no matter where you go, you're famous. Everybody loves you. These people must be big Dolphins fans. And the guy down front says, lady, we don't have any idea who the hell your husband is. All we know is the theater will not start this movie until there's at least 10 people in attendance.
I love that story, Bernie. You've told me that one before, and it's fantastic. And there's so many stories like that. We are talking to Bernie Fratto. He is the host of Straight Outta Vegas. You can hear that on Fox Sports Radio nationally every Saturday night from 11 o'clock to 3 in the morning, Sirius Satellite Radio, iHeartRadio. And Bernie, it's so great that finally you are getting the recognition that I've always thought you should have here in Vegas. It's funny, the extremes Bernie has gone to try to get his stories, talked about on the radio or him. It's unbelievable. And I've sat here from day one and said, this is the best guy in Las Vegas. And I'm not blowing smoke up Bernie's backside. He knows that I feel that way. Love listening to his stories. And you've helped, as I mentioned, you've helped me out so much with just the way that I present things and the way that I do things, learning from as good of a pro. And again, Bernie Fratto, the book is called The View from the Cheat Seats. I don't need to ask Bernie where he got the name from. That was his very first show ever in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He produced it. He developed it. He designed it. He came up with the name of it. And of course, now you get to use that in your first ever book, available at Amazon.com, Barnes and Nobles, and pretty much any place you can get books, you'll find this. It is such a good read. And Bernie, I love the way you talk about it in the foreword, saying it's the perfect book to buy. And it's funny because ironically, I've been to Costa Rica about 3 times this year. I wish I'd have had the book with me because it is the perfect book to read. A story when you're flying on the plane, when you've got a little bit of extra time. These are great stories. They're compelling. They're entertaining. In most cases, they're comical. Bernie, what's coming up down the road for you? It's great to see you doing the national show now. When I'm up that late on Saturdays, I listen. I usually get a little bit of sleep before the show. But what's next for Bernie Fratto?
Well, I got a bit of a promotion at Fox in addition to doing Straight Outta Vegas, which airs Saturday night, 11 p.m. Pacific to noon, or check that to midnight. And syndicated on 360 stations nationally. You can hear it on iHeartRadio, Sirius XM 83 the last several weeks, and now it's permanent. I'll be going to all the way through to 3 a.m. every day Pacific, or every Saturday, excuse me. So I sign on at 11 p.m. and the first hour Straight Outta Vegas. Then from midnight to 3, it becomes Fox Sports Sunday. Okay. And then I'm also getting an opportunity to fill in on other shows, most notably Fox Sports Sunday night, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. I've been on that like 8 of the last 10 Sundays. So I'm using them, I'm allowing them to use me wherever they need me, and I'm not turning down any work. And fortunately, it's working out well, and I'm building a following.
Bernie, I love it. And thank you for writing the book that you wrote. Again, it is called great book, The View from the Cheap Seats. As I said, I've read the introduction forward. By the next time we have you on the show, I will have it completely read from cover to cover. Looking very forward to it. I know some of the stories I've heard, but some of them I haven't. And like I said, it kicks off with the very first chapter about the real dream team. And I'm not going to give anything away on that because I kind of read a little bit of that and I was definitely surprised. I had no idea, and it's really cool. Bernie, thank you so much as always for joining the show. And one of the things Bernie taught me a long time ago on the show, he said, no matter how well you know your guest, and there's a couple of other shows that Bernie has pointed out that you don't refer to your guest as friend and hey, what's going on, my friend, and this, that, and the other. So I don't do that. I did that at the very beginning. I didn't know any better. Bernie taught me how tacky it was. But Bernie, you are truly my friend, on and off the air, and I appreciate everything you do on sports radio. Your stories are great, and keep doing what you're doing, my friend. I'll be listening every chance I get.
Right back at you, Brian. And as far as I'm concerned, you can be my agent.
I love it. That is Bernie Fratto, once again, straight out of Vegas, 10 to midnight on, or excuse me, 11 to midnight on Fox Sports National, Sirius XM, iHeartRadio, and then he's on from 12 to 3 after that. Don't miss this guy. I promise. If you haven't heard Bernie, once you do, you won't miss him anymore. Thanks again, Bernie. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Once again, that is Bernie Fratto. And let's move right over. Is Giggy with us? He's ready to rock and roll. Well, another professional sports team in Las Vegas, and a very successful one. And I have a feeling they might be actually the first professional sports franchise to bring a championship to Las Vegas. It is the Las Vegas Aces, featuring 5 Olympians. Actually should be 6 if Liz Cambage plays for Australia, which she would have had she been able to. So every time you go watch them play at the Mandalay Event Center, which now has a different name, and I should get it right, Giggy will help me out with that one. But you see 6 Olympians in every game, and it's pretty cool. They are very talented. Asia Wilson, who we knew when the Aces initially got her, that this was going to probably be a future face of the WNBA. Well, she's right there now, one of the best players in the league, as dynamic of a speaker as there is, and what an ambassador for the WNBA, who lost their true ambassador last year with the passing of Kobe Bryant, which is one of the biggest tragedies in probably the last 50 years in this country. And, that was a big shot to the WNBA to lose a great spokesman like that. But the WNBA moves on, and the Las Vegas Aces, one of the best teams. Matter of fact, one game back of being the best team in the entire league. John Giggy Maxwell is the director of media relations, gracious enough to join the show. And John, I'm not looking at Facebook Live right now, but I hope you're wearing one of your famous pairs of socks, because every game last year, now I got to sit way up in the nosebleeds because of COVID, but every game I would love seeing. Giggy always had a pair of socks on that would surprise us. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Good to see you again. It's been a while, and we're just now starting to move you guys back down to courtside. So hopefully during the playoff run here, we can get you back down there and you can see the socks in person. But unfortunately, not a game day. So I'm just wearing my typical Nike sponsored socks. Nothing fancy today.
All right. That's so well, Giggy, I got to start showing you my collection because you've inspired me. And I do that at my regular office, and I'm always lifting up my socks. And truly, that was from you, because I got a kick out of it every game. But listen, we've got a new segment coming up, as I kind of texted you with you yesterday. It is going to be called Aces Up. We are going to start it during the playoff run this year. Spencer the Wiz Ostrovsky, who is a huge WNBA fan, he educates me on it, is going to be hosting the segment on this show every week. We're looking very forward to it. And people ask, well, it's the WNBA, this, that, and the other. I got asked the other day, why are you going after a sponsor segment? You know what? Just like the Vegas Golden Knights have earned a segment on my show, so have the Las Vegas Aces, who have been nothing but entertaining. They've been a great plug to this community. Every year, one player usually stays back from Europe to be a spokesman. They have done just a tremendous job. Giggy, it's exciting basketball, and now you've got the second coach in WNBA history to chalk up 300 wins in Bill Laimbeer. Pretty cool stuff, John.
Yeah, not only are we one of the best teams, Bill and our general manager, Dan Padover, have built an incredible roster, as you already mentioned, with half the team being made up of Olympians, and Angel McCautry, had she not been injured this year, had a good shot at going for her 3rd gold. But it's also one of the more interesting teams in the league. When you've got somebody like Bill at the helm, it's always going to be entertaining. Asia Wilson, if you follow any of our players, Liz Cambage, Chelsea Gray on social media, they're a tremendously fun group. But when they get into the gym, it's all about business. And that's one of the things that Bill's always preached is we're not going to stay in the gym for 3 hours practicing all the time. We're going to go in for an hour and a half. We're going to get our work done and get out of there, but we're going to do our work. And so far this year, the Aces have done their work well. As you mentioned, a game out of first place in Connecticut, but it's going to be a dogfight down the stretch. There's 3 teams fighting for those top 2 spots, which are incredibly important in the WNBA playoff system, as you get an automatic bye into the semifinals. And then the first 2 rounds are 1-game situations. So if you're the 3rd or 4th seed this year, you could be a 23-24 win team and be that 3 seed. And all you're getting is 1 home game and a 1-game playoff. And you want to try and avoid that at all costs. So hoping to win some games down the stretch here. We've got a couple more home games left. And we're actually now selling tickets to those games for individual ticket buyers. It's been mostly season ticket members throughout the year. But if you want to come out and see us, just go to our LasVegasAces.com and click on the ticket link.
Exciting basketball, and you guys finally climbed over top of the Seattle Storm. I wouldn't say your nemesis because the Aces have actually played them very well this season. One of the teams that seems, I don't want to say having their number, but you just play well. The Aces match up well against them, but the truth is the Las Vegas Aces match up well against anybody. Now you've got the Sun with the best record at 20-6. The Aces will have a chance. Thursday night is their next game. They are playing at home, and the Chicago comes to town on Thursday night. But Giggy, as you mentioned, really important to get one of those first couple seeds. I think, it's to the point this year that even though Seattle is very strong, the Sun are very strong, the Lynx can still get things done, and so can the Mercury. But I think this is the year, the expectation surely of Bill Laimbeer and the players, at least of the Aces, expect this to be their year to win the whole thing. And I've said many times, it's funny because a lot of people say, well, man, the Vegas Golden Knights are going to be the first professional team to bring a championship to Las Vegas. I've disagreed with that emphatically. I think it's the Las Vegas Aces that are going to bring the first professional championship to Las Vegas.
One of the best things about being in Las Vegas has been how all the other teams are supportive of one another. And that predates sort of Mark Davis, obviously being our owner now and also the owner of the Raiders. Whether it's the baseball team, the soccer team, hockey, everyone has really been in all this together. So as supportive as we've all been, whoever brings it home, I think we're all going to be there for them. It's going to be a tremendous parade down the strip for whoever wins it. But to your point, we have the talent to win the championship this year. It's funny, you look at last year where we made the finals but lost to Seattle. We've only got 1 starter back in our lineup from that team, Asia Wilson. Kelsey Plum back from injury, 1 gold. Liz Cambage back after sitting out the year. So added Chelsea Gray. The talent is all there, but only 12 teams in the WNBA, one of the toughest leagues to get a job in, and everybody is fairly loaded, particularly those top 6 seeds. As you look at the standings, there's so much talent on those teams, which is why it's so important to avoid those 1-game playoffs. I'll take Bill Laimbeer in a 3 out of 5 series any day. He makes better adjustments than I think most coaches after a loss, particularly in the postseason. Won a championship with him, was fortunate enough in 2006 when we were in Detroit to do it, beating Sacramento, and we were down 2-1 and had to win the last 2 games to get the title. So I've seen him do it. He's a great motivator at that time of year. And we've got the horses, so let's just go ahead and go get it done. But obviously the Las Vegas fans have been an added boost for all of our professional sports teams, what they've done over at BGK games. And if you were at our game at UNLV 2 years ago in the playoffs when we beat Chicago in the 1-game playoff, I mean, that's what a crowd can do. And I think Las Vegas fans are primed for a championship. They're thirsty for it, and we're hoping to give it to them.
I would like to see it. I think everyone here would like to see that, and no question. Bill Laimbeer is a motivator, and the guy commands respect. I mean, 2-time NBA champion, former NBA rebound leader, former NBA All-Star, and on top of that, he's almost 7 feet tall, so he's intimidating as hell too. And he really brings it every night. You can see his passion out there on the floor, and hopefully we'll get Giggy to get him on the show again soon and be able to congratulate him on his 300th win, and to have 300 wins in the WNBA, only the second guy to do that. Really, really, really impressive. And Giggy, I'm going to ask you two questions. You can answer them back to back. One, I mentioned it briefly, the loss of Kobe Bryant. How much does the loss of Kobe Bryant affect, and has it affected the WNBA? Because I don't know that there was a bigger spokesman or more notable spokesman than Kobe Bryant was for the WNBA. And secondly, you brought up Mark Davis being now owner of the Las Vegas Aces, as well as obviously the owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. But what has that meant to this franchise and to the WNBA, getting an owner like Mark Davis involved?
Yeah, I mean, the Kobe Bryant loss was obviously not just huge for the WNBA, but huge for the sports landscape and beyond. He was such a proponent of our game, having daughters who played the game, having him courtside at our games, LA games, just shown a light on the league that I think a lot of NBA players, quite frankly, do. But when it's Kobe Bryant, when it's LeBron James, it's just a little bit of a bigger deal. So having those players be supportive and recognizing the talent level that is in the WNBA, you hope it encourages some people who are fans of the NBA game to switch the channel over to a WNBA game and check it out. It's obviously a different game. It's played below the rim for the most part, although we do have some players who can dunk and have dunked even this year. But it's sort of a game that you probably played, or more of a collegiate game that I think basketball purists appreciate. And Kobe was nothing if not a student of the game. So tremendous loss, but his energy is still felt around the league in many ways, and those of his daughters as well, especially Gigi. To Mark Davis, I mean, you couldn't ask for a more motivated owner than Mark. The biggest thing that he's done, I think that, or maybe the most surprising, because no other team has done it, has been the outreach to our alumni. Even though we've only been here 4 years in Las Vegas, the franchise actually dates back to the Utah Stars. The original WNBA had 8 teams. Utah was one of those original 8, and then went to San Antonio before coming to Las Vegas. And he has, at his expense, the team's expense, brought those players, whether you played 1 minute or 400 games for this franchise. He wants you to know that you are a part of this franchise forever. It's something the Raiders were the first team in the NFL to do, and they've done tremendously well. And it just creates a bond, a collegiate bond in many ways, that most franchises don't have. We're still a young league, and there's a number of teams that folded or moved throughout the course of the early days of the WNBA. There are players out there. I worked with the Charlotte Sting. Charlotte Sting doesn't exist anymore. There's players out there who are sort of orphaned from the league because their franchise doesn't exist. And Mark is reaching out to all of our players to make sure they know you were a part of this. You helped build this, and we want to honor you and make sure that you're a part of this success of this franchise. Because if and when we win a WNBA championship, it's been built on the backs of everybody who came before us, and it's been fun to watch that celebrated. In addition, obviously, the Raiders' mantra, "Just win, baby." I mean, that's what it's all about. He wants to treat the players as well as we are legally allowed to by the WNBA collective bargaining agreement. He wants to push that envelope to make sure that the players are well taken care of, and you couldn't ask for more than that in an owner. And he deeply cares about the fan experience as well. Our season ticket members did not have to pay for a single ticket this year during the regular season. Their tickets were gifted to them this season as a reward for sticking with us through the COVID outbreaks. So couldn't ask for more out of an owner, and we're looking forward to having a new practice facility built down in Henderson by the Raiders facility here coming up in 2022, and all that's going to bring us. And like you said, hopefully a championship parade, and we can bring that trophy out to Allegiant Stadium in front of a crowd of 60 some odd thousand people and celebrate it with the city.
We appreciate you, and yeah, pretty cool. The free tickets last year was awesome. He is John Giggy Maxwell, Director of Media Relations for the Las Vegas Aces. If you see him on the sideline, check out his socks. This is the new segment, Aces Up. It'll be every week throughout the rest of this season and the playoffs, and then next season, all season long. Giggy, as always, greatly appreciate you. Next game, Thursday night at Mandalay Bay against the Chicago Sky. Be there. We appreciate you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. We'll see you later.
Absolutely. That was Giggy Maxwell. Listen, we're almost out of time, or we are out of time. I just want to say the Las Vegas Aviators, I mentioned, have won 8 straight, 11 of the last 12 games. They got 9 more games on the road before returning home to the Las Vegas ballpark against Reno on September 9th. Check them out as they make a push for the playoffs. We are out of time. Little League World Series Championship American game goes on today at noon between Ohio and Michigan. First time ever 2 teams from the same region are playing for the American League Championship. Listen, we are out of time. I want to thank Bernie Fratto, John Giggy Maxwell, of course, my co-host, social media director, Spencer, the Wiz Ostrowski, and back in studio, Chris Magnum-Chapman. Appreciate y'all. Back next week, Caleb Herring to talk UNLV football. Bye-bye.